Hello, welcome to Soul Sessions with Creative Mind. I'm Deborah Burnt Maldonado.
And I'm Dr. Robert Maldonado, and today we're talking about the brilliance in the shadow.
The brilliance in the shadow. We're going to dispel the myths of the shadow being everyone's dark side and that it's negative and evil, and we need to get rid of it. We're going to talk about Jung's concept of the shadow in a coaching model. And we hope that this is going to inspire you to do your shadow work and free your mind. Because it's really, I think it's life-changing.
Yeah, it is. I really don't understand how people can get by without understanding at least the basics of Jungian models.
Yeah, a lot of Western psychology is about building up the ego. And Jungian psychology is so different. It's so unique because it's about letting go of the ego a little bit, but integrating other parts of ourselves and not just identifying with just the ego. So I find that this work is very liberating in a way. And I spent many years doing lots of self-help, building up my ego, and after a while, I mean, it's not bad, but after a while, there's another level you can go to, and that's where the shadow work comes in. And you really aren't free until you face your shadow. So let's talk about what is the shadow for people that don't know, for people that are new to Jung, or maybe a refresher for people who studied him before.
Yeah, I don't think we can define the shadow without defining the persona, because they go hand in hand, right? Mm-hmm. It's like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde or something like that.
And we talked about the persona in our last episode. Yeah. So if you've missed that, definitely go back and check it out.
But just for review, the persona is the mask, the role that we play in society. Externally, you can think of it as your personality, and then internally it's that ego, that sense of I, the self-concept that we have in our mind. Initially, Jung believed this to be only a preliminary stage of human development, that we needed to develop this persona in order to feel ourselves as an entity in society, and to be accepted by the society, by our clans, our culture, our families as well. Now, he says, as your mind and as you are developing and growing into this role, this persona that you're playing, there are things that you have to push away that you cannot include in the persona. They're either morally unacceptable to you or to the society, and therefore they don't serve a function.
Well, and initially it's for your family that I can't fit into this family. Yeah. Like my family, if you don't like sports, there's something wrong with you. You don't like the Yankees? Come on. You know, that kind of bonding, and we want to belong, that kind of need to belong and need to have each other. We're social creatures. And so there's a lot of pressure for us to conform. And if you look at the world, there's very, very few independent thinkers. Everyone's pretty much in that herd mentality, as Jung would say. And this is actually the danger of this from a global standpoint, is that if no one is waking up and everyone's just following what everyone else is doing, we're going to keep following maybe the wrong information or following destructive leaders, and just can lead to a lot of different terrible things that happen in the world because we're not having that critical thinking of, is this right, is this wrong, does this apply to me? We just blindly follow. And so initially it serves its purpose.
Absolutely.
But we're not meant to be that forever. Right?
Yeah, and unfortunately, the way Jung developed his idea of the shadow, because he was developing it in the context of his therapy work, working with people with mental health issues. And the whole, let's say his whole work, of course, was in psychiatry in a sense of working to define mental wellness and mental illness. So a lot of people kind of read his work or kind of get a hold of his ideas and they get that image that there's really something dark and foreboding about the shadow. And of course there are people that would have very dark tendencies that were pushed away into the shadow, especially in mental health settings. But if you think just in terms of kind of everyday people, the most of our shadows are simply about what helps us get along in society and what is not adaptive to us.
It's almost like the pleasing personality, like what's pleasing to others. That famous book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, is basically how to create a persona. And yeah, if you think about work, you have a persona. If I get certain degrees and if I dressed a certain way, they'll hire me. And if I look a certain way, I'll get the right partner. And so these persona, and like even in the family, there's the accolades of, oh, I'm the helping child. I'm the one who's there for, the family, the rescuer. We kind of identify with those roles. And there's a lot in psychology about the roles that people play. And we almost feel like it's given to us versus that we choose it, and then we're stuck with it. And for me, a lot of times I felt early on before I found out about Jung, I would feel like I was trapped in this personality that was just not optimal. And it's like I'm stuck and who I am isn't, there's something wrong with me kind of thing. And so I would do personal development to kind of make my persona better. Like I'm going to be more confident and I'm going to be more fun. And then we end up just not like creating something that we know is false, and it's not true to us. And then we still feel the outer world has power and we have no power. And so the persona really was developed from the assumption that the world has more power than we do.
Yeah, and then of course we're talking about it from our perspective in a coaching model.
Yes.
That we're looking at, okay, there is this dynamic between the role that we play consciously in society, the way we kind of describe and identify ourselves, this self-concept, and the shadow. There's that duality, right, of what we put forth as the things we identify with and what we rejected about ourselves. And Jung would say that shadow element is unconscious. It's running in the mind, but it's running unconsciously, meaning it's below the radar. We're not able to really perceive it in our everyday interaction. And so most people think the person that triggers me at work, the person that triggers me in my family, the people that I see out there on the internet that I see as bad or evil, they believe those are true. The ordinary person believes the badness, the shadow elements are out there. I can see them in others, but it's not me. Mm-hmm. Whereas Jung is saying integrating the shadow is morally difficult because of that. Because you have to accept that, the people that I identify as bad or as triggering me, they're really pointing at my own shadow.
Yeah, and not that you are that way, but that you are fearing being that or perceived that way. And what I love about Jung is that he talks about that polarity with everything has a other opposite end. So this idea, I remember, my early days of personal growth, is like creating this idealistic me that's all good, all enlightened, all powerful. I got rid of all my negative my baggage from my childhood. And there's this ideal person that has this perfection. And we can't, if we build that up as our persona, that means the opposite that we push away is the mess, the unevolved person, the reckless person, so we put that in our shadow. So we don't realize that you can't have one side without the other. And what Jung says about integration is that you have to see that you're not the persona or the shadow, that you're something else. And I do feel that sometimes people do shadow work. And even we've seen this happen in people that we've worked with, where they take on the persona and then they push away the shadow. And then they're like, okay, I'm going to integrate my shadow. So they just flip it. And so I'm going to be this badass, bitchy woman, and I'm going to put niceness in my shadow because I've been nice my whole life. So they just swap it, but you're still trying to compensate from the other. And so it's like this duality that we're really trying to, it's like rearranging the furniture. We never really get anywhere because we're just swapping personas. So this episode is really about the brilliance. And, there are a lot of people think that shadow is dark. This like, oh, it's all our negative beliefs. I see so many people represent the shadow saying it's negative beliefs. It's all the like not good enough and stuff. That's not the shadow at all. The shadow is more it's like more a behavior, psychological, psychic pattern that's much bigger than just thought or belief about yourself. It's more like a whole construction of expression that you can't put out there. So if you believe, so I think when we go into the conditioning socially, we try to like regulate ourselves to the group. And so it's that mediocreness that creates that persona shadow. And so when I think about the brilliance, the first thing I think about is what's beyond mediocre? What's that shining light? What's that you becoming successful, you having great love, you having all these amazing things that are different than the construction or the conditioning of your family? That's what I see as the brilliance in the shadow. But then there's another level to that.
Yeah, I think the next level beyond that is that the brilliance in the individual can only really shine forth when they integrate their shadow. Mm-hmm. When they're able to move beyond the duality of this is good and this is bad. Mm-hmm. Because if you think about how we define goodness or adaptability in our persona, meaning in the personality that we put forth into the world, we're using a completely arbitrary system based on our culture. So there's this idea of...
There's like it's assumed that there's a set rule, but it really is arbitrary.
It's arbitrary because we're all born into different cultures, and we know what is good in one culture is considered negative in another. Mm-hmm. For example, eye contact. In some cultures, you're expected to make good eye contact and to look at the person that you're speaking with and all that. In other cultures, that's considered bad manners.
Or even mental health. I mean, in some cultures, everyone has a therapist in my family. In other cultures, it's it
doesn't even exist.
Like cultures. If you have a mental health issue, then you're like, you have to keep it hidden.
Yes.
So, and so it is this arbitrary thing. And then so we make up this kind of self-concept that we think is real based on false information or misleading information, not solid information.
Right. So it's not about integrating bad things or negative things, because a lot of people think, well, there's anger in my shadow or these negative emotions. All those things are necessary, and they're part of our human nature, right, to protect us and to give us warning systems. But the brilliance comes through integration, because then you're free to really use your imagination to create the kind of situations in your life that you're capable of and that you want to express. Whereas when you're caught up in the shadow and playing that role, you're compelled to keep away the shadow elements.
You're caught up in your persona, you mean?
Yes, when you're caught up in your persona, because the shadow elements, the things you've pushed away, are too scary. Jung says that the shadow by nature threatens the persona you've created.
Well, here's you see these people all the time where they're maybe like unpopular in school, or they're kind of a nerdy person, and then all of a sudden they become this like they become the what do they call it, the I can't think of the word, where you become the
hero.
Like when a woman like is awkward as a kid, and then she comes out of her shell and she becomes the beautiful woman, like
the swan.
The swan, yeah. The duck becomes the swan, and then we think that's better. But then what happens is they push the ugly duckling in the shadow, And then they end up not feeling fully in their power because they're saying, my importance and my power is based on my looks and what everyone sees me as beautiful. And it's the same exact mechanism of what controlled you as the ugly duckling. So it's just, you're just swapping a different role, but the same mechanism is other people. I have to worry about what other people think. For me, I remember growing up, I was really smart in school, and I always got A's, and the teachers always embarrassed me, called me out like, "Oh, well, Deborah knows the answer," and I never had boyfriends in high school, except my senior year. That's when I broke free. But I was always the smart girl that wasn't attractive, and then when I started blossoming into my beauty, or kind of men started, got my hair done differently, started dressing differently, creating a different persona. I put that intelligence in my shadow, and I would be Fun Debbie. And I dated someone from high school once, and he remembered me from high school, and he's like, "Why do you pretend you're dumb all the time? Like, why do you have this airhead kind of thing?" And I said, "Well, men don't like smart women." And so it's that kind of shadow, like that part of me I had to put away. And so a lot of times we do that. We put on an act, and the shadow is something we're not conscious of, but truly I was not conscious that I put it away. I was just it was like this automatic, like an adaptation. The social messages are, and for women especially, you have to look a certain way, you have to weigh a certain amount, and we create this persona, and then we reject that other part. But that part is still there. It doesn't go anywhere. Yeah. So it's still controlling us. And the freedom comes from not identifying with the ego. That's really the key.
Yeah, there are a lot of gender issues that play into persona shadow elements. But for me, for example, it was about ambition. The persona I had created was one of kind of peaceful, educated, right, looking for wisdom. And so the ambition, the drive to create something new, to succeed in the world, often takes the back burner or goes into the shadow, as Jung would say. And so individuation, what it allows you to do is through the integration of persona shadow, then you're able to choose your life, your destiny in a conscious way, because the persona shadow, you can think of it as adaptability. It's helping you adapt to society, to fit in.
External.
Yeah, and to kind of be okay with yourself, the role, the kind of defining the role that you're playing in society, that it's acceptable to the group and it's acceptable to you. But that's not real freedom, because you're very limited in only playing that role. It limits you by saying anything outside of that role is unacceptable, and you can't move outside of that. And so a lot of people kind of wonder, how come I can't create success, or how come I can't do the things that I see the people that I admire doing? So they know there's that admiration, there's that kind of wanting to do things that other people are doing, but they say it's not for me, right? Because of that identification with that limited role of the persona. So the integration allows you then to say, no, if I admire something and I see a need to do something, I can do it.
And when we say the brilliance is that we see our shadow in the people that we say, that's them, not me. Yeah. Anytime, whether it's the good, positive, what you identify as positive or negative qualities. So you see someone like Oprah and you say, wow, like she's a billionaire, she's successful, she knows all most famous people, and you may admire her and love her stuff, or Brene Brown, a lot of women think she's amazing. And the thing is that's it. If you admire something in someone else, that's in your shadow. That your persona is just taking on the role of, I'm just this ordinary person. So if you think about the persona of the ordinary person, the shadow would be the extraordinary person. So, but the ego's afraid of being that extraordinary person. So it's not about that you can't be that, or you have to think positive and say affirmations. It's you have to really get to, well, what is holding me back? Why is my ego afraid of me being extraordinary? Like, what is the downside of that? Like, we all think we want to. We think, well, maybe we just need more confidence, or we have to visualize harder. But it's like, what is that mechanism? And for me, it was always the bigger our business became, the more responsibility I felt for people, and more people I was responsible for. And it was like a lot of pressure. And so it's easy to help 10 people versus help 100 people, and then have the pressure. And so a lot of times people hold back, and then being judged on a big level. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why. So we can watch them from afar and say they're so amazing, but what we don't know is like that we have that potential in us. We there's nothing holding us back from having anything that anyone you admire has, except your own fear. The fear of and we don't even realize we fear becoming them because we admire them. So it's kind of a tricky thing. We don't really see it as, I'm afraid of becoming them. We just don't think we can be.
I know. Well, out of that whole Jungian psychology piece came out this idea of the eternal boy and the eternal girl.
We're getting into the puella and puer eternus.
Right, because it is about maturation. It is about accepting responsibility for your life. And if you notice, when we're caught up in the shadow, in the persona shadow, we're not really taking responsibility. We're saying these external forces, it's the economy, it's my sister Kate, it's my parents.
It's like that poor me mentality, like nothing works out for me, I have bad luck. And
yes, so there's always these good excuses, and of course in the culture and in society, no one will blame you for those things. They'll say, yeah, we understand, right? You've had it rough, or you were dealt a bad hand, and therefore you should not succeed, or you have a good excuse for not succeeding, or not being happy, not being fulfilled in your work. In the individuation process, in the integration of the persona shadow, you drop those excuses. There are no more excuses. If you're responsible for yourself and your life, you're going to take the reins of your life. You know, it's a challenge, yes, but you're able to move towards creating the kind of life that you know you want to create.
And so it takes great moral courage to face the shadow, because it really does take courage to accept responsibility for your life. And when we're younger, everyone takes care of us on the outside. You know, everything's like externalized. We're born, our mother feeds us, we clothe us. We didn't have to get a job when we were in high school, like we were still home. And then we kind of look for, we go from college to take care of us, give us that degree, and then go into the workplace, and then the workplace takes care of us. And it's this, mostly in society, we're always kind of dependent on the outside world to make sure that we're okay. And I think, especially now, people are like still acting, like young. Like I think our society has grown younger because we admire youth more than I think we did 50 years ago. Like maybe 50 years ago we admired like our grandparents and the wise old people, and now like youth is being kind of idolized, with everyone kind of putting their filters on their Instagram and they look 10 years younger. And so it's this kind of wanting to stay young. Even mothers, they want to be their daughter's best friend. They want to dress like their daughter, that Forever 21. And we I think as a culture, we need to start to grow up. We need to mature. I don't know if it's just the U.S. or America or Western culture in general.
It's the whole world.
It's the world. Is that no one wants to everyone wants to, no one wants to take responsibility. And that's, it is hard, because then if you can't blame anyone else, then you turn inward. But I think a lot of people think that taking responsibility means blaming yourself. And really, you can't blame yourself for something you're not conscious of. You have to take just responsibility for understanding who you are. That's what you take responsibility. And the more you understand who you are, the more you understand your shadow, what's unconscious, the more you grow and the more you can. Basically, then you can really make choices that are free.
Yeah, well, Jung, let's say he critiques modern society this way. He says, in getting rid or trying to get rid of our past, of the kind of the institutions of the past, religion, cultural norms that helped people move into these more mature stages of life. We lost those mechanisms. Like, how do you initiate people into this responsibility for themselves? It used to be that there were rituals precisely designed to help people do that. That, okay, you're not a boy anymore, you're not a girl anymore, you're meant to step into a bigger role. And it was kind of culturally and socially sanctioned, so that you understood when you were what was expected of you at these different stages of life. Now it's kind of just a free flow, right? Nobody really instructs anybody else on how is that you're meant to be doing life.
I feel like for me, I finally took responsibility when I became an entrepreneur. Yeah. I feel like I was a little puella eternus, the eternal girl.
Yeah.
When just being like looking for someone to marry me and take care of me, and that whole Cinderella, you're going to take care, we're going to find this person, and my whole life's going to be better. I don't need to worry about a career, or my own money, or my own future. I just need someone to kind of rescue me from this single life. And when I started out as an entrepreneur, I didn't have the company to pay my regular paycheck, get my little allowance every 2 weeks. It was, I have to be in charge of my own money and my own, and I had to push there was no one telling me you have to be at work. I had to be responsible for showing up and doing things I needed to do. And I think I had a German father who was very strict and always kept us on task. So I had that conditioning in me to be responsible that way. And but that's really found my power, because if you're waiting for the world to take care of you and always thinking the world is letting me down and not saying, well, where's my power? You're going to feel like you're just reacting to life.
Yeah. I think it does begin with knowledge, and that ability to self-examine, because that's what Jung was talking about. He's saying you have to be aware. In other words, you have to create a psychology or let's say a culture of teaching this to people, a way of helping them understand what does life demand of me? Like, am I just here to enjoy life and eat, drink, and be merry until it's time to go, or is there a higher purpose in this?
It's almost like, are you saying that most people are conditioned to take from life versus give back?
Yeah, I mean, if you just let's say depend on your senses to tell you what's good and what's bad. Well, obviously, we move towards pleasurable things, but we know that if we just operate on that principle, it leads us nowhere except to, glutting ourselves with more food if it's available, or seeking more and more pleasure or more material. That's the whole basis of modern society, right? The consumer society, that if you get more, you'll be happier.
Yeah, there was this big kind of movement in, I think, the 90s, 80s and 90s, late 80s, early 90s, and I remember in Colorado, everything was about buying the bigger house, moving out further into the suburbs so you can have this giant sprawling house with then
you'll be happy.
Then you'll be happy. And we used to have this, I lived in Denver, and there was a place called Highlands Ranch, and it was kind of like the suburban house, and it says where married people go to die. Because it was you go out there, you never see them again, they just kind of disappear. And it's this kind of idea that the more we have, and then they're unsatisfied, and you see people get divorced, and you're thinking, I thought they had a happy life.
But we know statistics. I mean, some of the most abundant countries on the planet, and they're the most miserable. In other words, more material does not generate more happiness.
Yeah. Didn't they say it was at Bhutan that they said was the happiest place because their whole culture is about being joyful?
That's right.
And not materialism. And let's say materialism is bad because it's, nice to have resources, but it's also, it can't be the only thing. It can't be the only thing that we find happiness
again,
in.
if you go back to that idea of individuation, if most people in society are not individuating, in other words, they don't have a way to take the reins of their life, to take responsibility for their lives, then they're buying into that initial idea of more is better, right? The more your persona is accepted, the happier you'll be. And that's just not true. We know the individual has to take responsibility for themselves and create their own meaning. If they depend on the society to give them the meaning, it sets you up for feeling like I'm being manipulated, right? I'm being exploited by the society, where I'm just, the more I work. And
it's all to build up this persona that
yes, exactly.
What your neighbors think, and look how good this person's doing, and
yes.
he must be successful, and look at what kind of car they're driving.
That's right, and it just ends up creating this dissatisfaction with life, which is the source of suffering, basically.
I know you said once that it's a tragedy when things work out for people that are not enlightened.
Right, because if it works out for you in the persona, right, that you start to think, oh, I'm doing pretty good. Like, people respect me and I have prestige, but you're not doing your internal work. That is a tragedy, because now you're going to lock yourself into that pattern. That, it's the golden handcuffs of people that are very
really successful. They're a doctor, a lawyer, and they're doing really well, and then
but they haven't
happy.
done the internal work.
Yeah.
And so those things don't really hold the meaning for them. They're just kind of these external roles that they're playing. It's that imposter syndrome that people fall into as well.
Famous people too, they get all that success and wealthy, and I know Jim Carrey talks about it a lot, that I wish everyone was rich and famous and had all the money in the world and all the attention that I have, and realize that that's not it, that there's something more. And so when we think about brilliance, is that the brilliance in us is not our persona. It's understanding that we're more than just the ego. We are an unlimited being. We are connected to the cosmos. We're pure consciousness. We're this bigger concept than just this small little human trying to survive in the world. And and I think that sometimes, like you say, the good life is a trap. And I think a lot of people that seek personal development, a lot of them, they have their sad story. They have this kind of thing that happened that set them up for failure, and that's why they're having all these problems in life. But I want to say that no matter who you are, no matter how perfect your childhood is, we're all set up the same way to believe we're the persona. So yours just I find that the people that had the most difficulty, they have the kind of the fastest track to self-realization than someone who's had this perfect. They say that you bulldoze it. You bulldoze all the barriers, and you're just kind of like moving through life, and everything just works out perfectly. You're in the flow. You don't really gain courage and strength through that, or meaning in your life, than if you've had to struggle and wrestle with what is life about. My famous saying is that the path of least resistance is the path of least existence. And that we want to face those conflicts that come up, the shadows, the people that trigger us, to know who we are, so we can experience the brilliance of who we are, versus settle for this little tiny uniform or persona that we think is going to, this little sliver of mask that's going to keep us happy and make our life better.
Yeah, as far as the challenges, there are those two perspectives. So if you look at it from the ego persona perspective, then challenges are only obstacles that are preventing you from reaching your goals. And a lot of coaching models are kind of based on that idea that, oh, let's get rid of the blocks and let's get you to achieve those
clear
goals.
all those negative beliefs so you can be good and perfect.
Yes. And there's nothing wrong with that as long as you understand that you're simply working on the persona there.
Yeah.
You're kind of working on the external level. The other perspective is that this higher self is really putting these challenges there for you so that you can work with your mind.
You can see the edges of your suffering through the challenges, and it's like it's like I love what you say is that it's like a lock. It locks the things that we're attached to locks us in, and when we get triggered, it gives us the key to unlock us and free us. So every time we're triggered, it's our freedom is right there, but we want to avoid it. We want to avoid people that annoy us. We want to avoid difficulties. We want to avoid challenges, and we're always looking for that safe, predictable, non-risky way to go in life, and that's where we don't really live. We don't have a life well lived. We have a life existed, and that's not really what we're meant to be here.
Yeah, and so you see the difficulty that left to our own devices, we'll tend to avoid the difficult parts of life because it's always easier to blame others, to blame society, to blame the world for our problems and not take that responsibility. So we almost have to force ourselves to really make a conscious effort. And that's where coaching comes in, that it's a way to hold ourselves accountable and say, can you help me hold my feet to the fire so that I can do this difficult challenge, because I know it's going to kind of give me the real meaning of my life, the real purpose.
One of Jung's quotes that I love, I'm going to paraphrase because it's pretty long, but he said that the shadow is a narrow passage. It's kind of like very constricting at first because you're seeing your own, like the things you resist about yourself and about being your humanity. And he goes, but on the other side of the shadow is a wide open space where there's no up, no down, no left, no right, no good nor bad. It becomes pure potential, and you can't get there unless you face your shadow, unless you get out of that duality of the ego and integrate and see that you're not the ego. And it's really, I think a lot of people try to read books on the shadow. I always hear people, what book should I read on this? Read a book, but you have to get coaching. You have to go through the experience yourself. You have to wrestle with it. And it is not it's not that it's not terrible, but it is challenging because your ego will resist the process. So you need someone to help you move through it. And but on the other side, brilliance. That's where the brilliance is.
Yeah, it is challenging because it's such a personal thing. Mm-hmm. If you think
it's emotional.
Yeah, the difficulty is not intellectual. Most people can understand the concept of the shadow fairly easily. But emotionally, it's like you have to face your own personal fears, your own personal kind of judgments about what you don't want to be. And that's the difficult part, right? To sustain that kind of focus on your own mind and to be accepting of it.
Well, I think the main thing is this, for me, working with the shadow, is I felt that I didn't want anyone to think bad of me. Like I had such a barrier. I mean, I guess we all do. We want everyone to think good things of ourselves. And to accept that sometimes we can say the wrong thing and we can hurt people unconsciously, and owning that. We have such a resistance to just owning our mistakes or looking like a fool, or it's almost like the fear that if I don't act perfectly and aligned with what other people expect of me, people are going to leave. And this feeling, like this fear that you're going to be abandoned by the tribe is so visceral. It's like, no, you're going to be alone and isolated forever and just wither away. And so it's a real fear that the ego has. And so when we face the shadow, that's what we're facing, is that how can I be myself and put myself out there and risk not pleasing someone thinking I'm wrong, someone, feeling hurt by what I did, not intentionally, but that sometimes we do. We're messy with people. I mean, we're human beings. Everyone has their own triggers. You can't possibly create the perfect persona that's going to fit in with every person in the world that makes everybody happy. So it's exhausting. It's such a big pressure to do that. And that's why I think it's so scary, is like we have to let go of that control of what other people think. And it is the toughest thing to do because we all care. We all care. And it's a good quality, but also it holds us back. I mean, if we didn't care what people think and we were reckless with people, we would be alone. But that's not really what we're after. We're after just making a choice out of it.
Yeah, and it's ironic that most of us think that by fitting into society, we're doing society a favor, but it's the opposite. We're really bringing society down by playing along and just fitting in.
It's like the lowest common denominator, just stays. Right?
And keeping the same patterns going. What really helps society is people to exert their individuality, their real ideas and humanity about what's going on. Like, how can we really help people? How can we really impact society in a creative and positive way? That only comes through people that are willing to look at their shadow, to really do the internal work.
I also find this makes me think about, I remember being in groups sometimes where personal development groups, and I'm sure you all can relate to this, is you're in a group and then in a way it's easier to be with the people that aren't awake than the people that are, because the people that are trying to coach you all the time. Like you almost like you have to have a higher level of awareness in the group. You can't just be yourself. And I don't think that's where we want to be either. We don't want to be in this judgy, you're not awake, you're projecting, calling people out. Like I've been in different groups where it's almost uncomfortable just saying, I'm having this problem, and everyone trying to fix you. So you definitely want to be in a community or a culture where you're not judged for even being human, and you're not judged for projecting, and it's just like, that's just the nature of your mind, and it's more of an acceptance versus the whole group's trying to get you to call you out on things. I think there's a lot of those like group therapies where they're all like calling everyone out, and then you're afraid to even show your humanity because now you have to put on this persona of being this enlightened person that took this workshop and now you should be perfect. I remember, I don't know if you've never been in those groups, but I've been in those groups, and it feels very uncomfortable. It's almost like easier to be with my unconscious friends who just, we could be silly and crazy, and then you get into these kind of communities where people are calling each other out, and there's a lot of judgment of, you don't know it yet, and you need to grow, and that kind of thing. So what we really want to do is when we face the shadow, it's not calling people out and being real with each other and accepting, and in a non-judgmental way.
I'm a little bit more tolerant. I think it's a messy process. Any human affair, if you think about relationships, if you think about groups, anything, it's a messy business. Yeah. Let's say we're going to fail at it. Yeah. But the intention to grow, to communicate, even if it's done badly, even if it ends up blowing up in our faces, that's just human nature. We have to work through it.
And I think that was a lot of my projection too, is that I'm in this group now, I have to act that I'm perfect now. I've done the workshop, and now I'm like can do things, I should be a certain way, and that you're just buying into that persona. But I do see that like a lot of people calling people out and making people feel bad, and like I don't think that's part of being open and being honest and direct with people. I think it should be more compassionate when we're going through it, and so it's really the compassion for ourselves that we need to feel about the times that we're not perfect. That this isn't about becoming the perfect persona, the most enlightened persona. We want to be the most aware of everything, all parts of ourselves,
Yeah.
and love of those parts that are a little rough around the edges still.
Yeah, I think I've made all the mistakes that you can make in personal development. That
Have you? Name one.
I'm tolerant with most people, and I'm also tolerant of people that say I can't do this. This is too hard for me. You know, I'm not ready for it, or it's too scary for me. I understand that because yeah, I've been there. You know, it just feels like it's easier to go back to our preset patterns, right? Our defense mechanisms, and just go along with the program.
But there shouldn't be this pressure to be perfect. You know, I think that's the main thing.
Yeah.
Is that, like you said, it's people are going to be messy, and to be compassionate with people as they go through their process.
Yeah, yeah.
Not have this hierarchy of it. And I know a lot of it was for me when I was in those groups. It was my shadow of like I'm afraid to show my mistakes or where I'm not where I need to grow more. You know, kind of hiding that a little bit. And I think we all. So that comes into, so the ego will use your personal growth as a way to create a persona shadow as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, you know, we do the best we can. We set the best intention that we can set, and go in with the understanding that we'll probably get it wrong.
Yeah.
We'll probably mess up, but that we still want to try. We want to try to do it.
I like this too when it comes to even any relationship, to feel that you could say what you need to say without the fear of them leaving you. That you can actually be yourself and be honest and vulnerable. And for me, it was like hiding the weakness was like I had to hide that. And actually, I remember one time when we first met. It was when I first started my business, my hypnotherapy practice. You were still getting your PhD, or you got your PhD. You were kind of finishing up everything, and I was a little scared about money. And I remember just like getting like nervous, and I was very, very shortly after we met. And you said, and I was like kind of embarrassed that I got upset about it. You know, it had nothing to do with you. It was like more like I'm stressed out. And you said to me, Deb, I feel closer to you now. And I love that because I was like, for the first time, it was like I didn't have to hide my vulnerability. I didn't have to put on this, you know, mask of I got it all together. And it's like, oh, I could be vulnerable and a mess, and he still loves me. Like that's what love is about. And if we understand that, we do love deeply, more deeply, other people when we're vulnerable and we're open.
Absolutely, yeah.
Do you remember that conversation?
Vaguely, but
it just touched me so much because I think it was the first time I ever had a man where I even allowed myself to be vulnerable and show how I really felt or showed my real fears, and to have someone say, I love that, do more of that. Like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Except there's no crying in this household. You know, my family growing up, it was like crying was a weakness, and it was just kind of a nice to allow that part of my shadow out. This vulnerable, scared part of me is also a part of me, you know, and not like shove her in the corner and hide her from the world. That I can be that, and it's okay.
Yeah, I mean that just comes with the experience, with that inner work, with working with many families. In a lot of my clinical practice, I worked with families. And I saw that a lot of what tripped them up was this idea that they had to appear to be getting along. And that as long as they were doing that, it was fine. And that gets people into trouble. The appearance doesn't matter that much. It's really what is going on in the real relationship, in the real communication between people. Because if you focus on the appearance, that often sets you up for good enough, right? It's good enough just to appear to be getting along, to be happy, to be doing whatever you're doing. And it really what matters is, are you happy? Are you really happy? Are you really communicating? Are you really living your life?
You know what's really cool I want to share is that my family, we're very, we use humor as a defense, and we tease each other a lot, and we're kind of, we love each other, but we don't really talk about it that much. And I just recently went home. It was my mom's 80th birthday, and we just started, it was all my siblings. We were hardly ever in the same room because we live all over the country. And we don't talk a lot on the phone a lot, certain siblings are closer than others. And we're all just sitting there. And I don't know who started it, probably me. But we just started going around and saying what we appreciate about each other. And it's something that we don't do normally. And it was just so beautiful to just allow ourselves to give to the other person. And there were a lot of tears. And it was just such a different experience. And I don't know if COVID being away from each other and kind of like finally being able to be together in one place kind of forced that shift. But it was probably one of the most special moments with my family ever. I mean, it was really, really, really nice. My mom was taking a nap, so she came down and she like missed most of it. But then we started going around, and it was just so tender and wonderful. And I think that we want to be nice, but it's almost like that tenderness seems to be non-adaptable in our society. Right. And that giving someone a compliment, and being able to receive a compliment.
Yeah, it's uncomfortable for a lot of us, and just because of that messiness, emotions are not clean and precise, right? It's an energy that we're expressing and feeling between each other.
And then as we work with our own shadow, we're able to allow these other aspects out that are the parts of the unlived part of ourself that has not, the persona hasn't let basically out in the open, out of the closet basically. And we can be more of a whole person. We can be more rich and not afraid to interact with and be ourselves with other people and really be fully expressed. So that's what I love about the brilliance of the shadow. So we have a lot of comments. They really love it. The happiest person I ever met didn't even have 4 walls in his house. Yeah. And then this was my favorite podcast so far. Great. And I love that part about coaching. I can get messy and be blind, and my coach could keep the light on my feet. Yes.
That's right.
Yeah, I think a lot of people resist coaching or that one-on-one. They want to do the work on their own. They want to kind of read a book or do a workshop, but not really get the coaching. I notice there's a lot of people that hesitate, and it's because we're so afraid of that vulnerability that comes into that relationship, is to really get close to another person. And that's where life is to let someone else in. I mean, that's really, and allow them in and you in them. It's just beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, I can attest that I had obviously seen a lot of psychologists and professors and people doing incredibly brilliant things with their life. But until I worked with coaches and I saw how they were doing their work and kind of in a very direct and practical way with people, I really didn't have a clue as to what the possibilities were with coaching. And I don't think I would be here basically without that experience. So thank you to everybody that's putting themselves out there as coaches. And like I say, even if they're messing it up, their intention is there. And that's a very powerful statement for human beings to see. Yeah.
And I'm glad that it's becoming more and more common for coaching and growing so much, because I do feel like we need an ally in our life. Life is not easy. And no matter how easy you think it is, like you get married, you have a good job, all those things lined up, but it's still hard. Life, there's people that get sick, there's challenges with your job, there's difficult people and complex relationships. I mean, it's not easy. So we need someone to help us work with our mind and to understand ourselves, and that going inward and really understanding who we really are on a deep level is really the key to freedom and the key to happiness, because you can acquire a lot of great material items in the world. even people, as an object in the world. But it's until you know who you are, you're kind of in poverty mentality. When you know who you are, you're the richest person in the world.
So
yes, great, and it's scary to be vulnerable. Yeah.
Yes, it is. It is. Thanks for the great comments and questions, and
we'll see you next week on our next podcast.
Yeah.
And
are we continuing our series?
Our last series on mindset.
Excellent.
And then we're going to get into relationships, our next series. So that should be good. Not just romantic, but all type of relationships: family, parenting, work relationships, our boss, our customers, team. If you're running a team, those kind of relationships, it's going to be very interesting. So take care, everyone. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks for watching.
Bye-bye.
Stay well.